welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. Welcome into the ECU weekly roundtable. We are live. We are on Facebook. We're on YouTube. I tried to just pull us up on Twitter. It said our broadcast was unavailable. I don't know if that's just my phone or what. I don't know about you guys, but I'm Stephen Igo. Scott Lorbatcher, Jonathan Wagner are alongside. Before we get started, I want to reemphasize we're running a 50% off special on Hoist the Colors. Subscribe now. Get 50% off for the next year. If you're a monthly subscriber, you can upgrade your subscription for 50% off. You get the annual price, half off. You're locked in through the year. You get baseball season, spring football, recruiting season, preseason camp, football season, basketball season, all of that going on over the course of the next year. 50% off. Join in while you can. Guys, we got a lot of ECU baseball to talk about. Also, want to reemphasize the need to like our broadcast, subscribe on the Hoist the Colors YouTube page, not just on hoistthecolors.net, and comment. You guys hear us talk about this. You hear it on every podcast you listen to, but who actually does it? Well, I'm telling you right now, do it. It makes a difference. It helps our numbers. We still are looking for an NIL deal for the podcast. Scott Lorbatcher is going to hunt you down. He's going to break into your house on May 2nd if you don't do it by May 1st, and he's going to like, subscribe, and comment on your computer under your username. Scott, tell them they need to do it right now.
You got to do it. And once you have liked, commented, subscribed, then you're going to hit that bell that's beside the subscribe button. That gives you notifications that tells you when we're live, so you know right when we go live. You don't miss the beginning when we tell you to like, comment, and subscribe every time, because you'll be here to know that you have already done what we've asked of you.
He nailed it. Couldn't have said it any better. Yes, that is a Bill Dance t-shirt. Johnny Gardner asked. As always, comment on our live stream. We'll read it on the air. We're already getting questions about basketball and the basketball transfer portal. Christian, appreciate it. This is a baseball podcast. We will discuss some basketball, perhaps. I can tell you right now, ECU is looking at a lot of people in the transfer portal, and there's a lot of moving parts, including a lot of NIL money being offered right now. ECU can't really do that to the top guys in the country, so it's a little bit of a struggle, but they are trying and efforting. So let's talk baseball, guys. Pirates, 4-1 week. They've gone 9-1 over the last 10 games. That's 2 5-game weeks. That's extremely difficult to do. We'll get into what the theme of this podcast is, at least to start with. Is ECU already being disrespected in the national polls? We'll talk about that here shortly. But, Jonathan, let's talk about this past week. 4-1. It didn't start the best way. Obviously, losing the opening game to UNCW was not ideal. But the Pirates come back. They win 4 in a row. And I think you can't really ask for more over 10 games, over 2 5-game weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming off of that, 5-0 week last week, you kind of wondered, another 2-game midweek set plus a challenging weekend series. And, I think last week I talked a lot about how UNCW at UNCW is always just the most frustrating game. For whatever reason, it just always is. And it lived up to the billing this year. And UNCW took that one. And then you had to rebound on Wednesday. You did not want to enter the weekend 0-2. You came back on Wednesday. You won a close game. And then you played looking at the numbers from this weekend, you might not think Missouri State's that good. But Missouri State, they can hit. I think it speaks more about ECU's pitching. I think that's the storyline. But really impressive weekend all around. A lot to like, a lot to talk about. And you couldn't have asked for a better week considering how you started if you're ECU.
Scott, I remember you saying in the preseason that you thought the Missouri State series was one that you really looked forward to most. Did it end up living up to the hype, just in terms of watching it as far as following along?
Yeah, for sure. We're talking about a legitimate program here, not just a good team, but a good program that's had a coach for 41 years, that's coached major league MVPs. And then we go into the series and we have a great pitcher's duel on Friday night, a game that we have to come back and win on a walk-off on Saturday. And then I think we just wore them down by the time we got to Sunday. You saw a little bit in the field where, they made some mental errors, balls that they probably make 9 out of 10 times those plays, but they didn't, just because of how mentally anguishing those first 2 games were for them. And, we come out of this 10-game stretch, 9-1, 16-4. I don't think you can ask for a whole lot more than that out of our ball club.
Pirates are 16-4, 20 games in. Definitely a tremendous start to the season. We'll get into maybe the differences between weekend, midweek stuff, and how ECU can overcome that going forward. But guys, let's talk about the national polls. Sky has an awesome thread on Hoist the Colors. If you're unfamiliar with our website, but you listen to the podcast, just check out the thread on Hoist the Colors. Scott did a tremendous job kind of breaking down the teams in the top 25, who's ahead of ECU, who's behind ECU, how they're doing. He gives his Butler Pirate top 25 predictions each week. And I think we were all a little surprised at what D1 baseball specifically, how they handled the rankings this week. We give them the most credit. They probably cover it better than anybody. They deserve the most credit. They put in the most man hours into it. But ECU to go 4-1. I think we all kind of expected the Pirates to jump 16-4. Already have a series win over North Carolina. It's not like they haven't played anybody. And instead, the Pirates remain pat at 10. Scott, we'll start with you. Just how surprised were you with the Pirates hanging at 10 instead of maybe jumping up a spot?
I thought we would at least move to 9. I think I actually didn't have Ole Miss falling as far as they ended up falling. Did have Tennessee dropping pretty far, but yeah, I mean, you look at our schedule and we're 2-1 against top 25 teams. 2 of those games were on the road. That's the same record that Virginia has against the current top 25. UCLA is actually 1-2 against the top 25. You look at quad 1 and 2 wins and losses were 10-2. Virginia's 10-2. UCLA is 8-3. Now, granted, they played 3 games at Vanderbilt, so I mean that's probably a more difficult series than anyone we've played. But yeah, I mean, I think that we don't necessarily get credit for playing difficult games, because we do play difficult games in midweeks. There's a lot of really good baseball around us. You look at a school like Elon that we played, that they went to Raleigh and thumped NC State, and then Virginia plays. I think Virginia handled State pretty well on Friday night, and then Saturday was a close game, and then Sunday they ended up losing. I think they played Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They might actually play Thursday through Saturday, but either way, Virginia's marquee wins are 2 wins in Chapel Hill, and we have 2 wins over UNC as well. But when we won those games, we didn't make a enormous leap in the poll. I think we went up 2 spots, and then we lost those 2 spots the next week by going 2-2, despite winning 2 games on the weekend and playing a difficult team in Duke and Durham. I think it's D1 Baseball does a great job covering everyone. If you listen to their podcast today, the Shock Factor podcast, they talked about us, and they talked about a lot of programs that aren't in the so-called Power 5, right? But if you listen to the Top 25 Breakdown podcast from last Tuesday, the one with Fitt and Rogers and Rooney, and sometimes Joe Healy, they said, let's go through the conferences, and then they discussed the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12. They made one comment on the Big 10, and I was expecting them to talk about and everyone else, right? And I think that's fair, because those 4 conferences are legitimately the best 4 conferences in baseball. But then they didn't. They just ended the podcast, and it's frustrating that even the Big 10 gets a little bit of coverage, right? But we haven't been mentioned on their podcast for the last 2 weeks, and we're in the top 10. So, I think it's kind of if you don't watch us, you don't realize how legitimately good this pitching staff is, and how good East Carolina is and how good some of the teams we're playing are. Missouri State would finish second in this league. They would finish pretty high up, and they would win the Big Ten, and they would finish high. They would finish in the top half of a lot of other leagues. So, I think it's just really unfair that there are so many teams, there's so many programs, and there are a lot of really good teams out there. And if you only look at the conferences that are, get a special bye in football, then you're missing out on some really, really good baseball.
I don't know, Scott. Iowa baseball, there's no shot that Missouri State could top the Iowa Hawkeyes, who have now been ranked in both D1 and Baseball America this year.
Yeah, Indiana's like 13-7, so let's go ahead and throw them in the top 25 too, so we can have another top 25 win, because I'm pretty sure we beat them like a drum. So, and they might be the second best team in the Big Ten.
Yep. Yeah, there's no doubt. Jonathan, your take on this, and I'll just say before we throw it to you, like, I just think for whatever reason, the Power 5 bias has bled into college baseball now. And, a team like UVA, because their name is UVA, and a team like North Carolina or NC State, they just seem to get more credit. Even we just talked about it in the Big Ten. Like, if you compare Iowa's resume to probably a lot of other smaller conference teams out there, I'm sure Iowa's resume is probably less than that. But it's just frustrating when that seems to bleed into college baseball. Just your take on the Pirates maybe not getting as much respect as we would like.
Yeah, and first of all, like Igo said, check out Scott's thread on the Horsey Colors message board. Puts a lot of hard work into that, and it's the first thing I check every morning. And it's really a nice little cheat sheet every morning to kind of see what happened, what's going to happen. So check that out. But yeah, I agree. It's frustrating that the same criteria doesn't seem to be used. And you can say all you want about conferences, but in the end, when you're talking team to team, because that's what it should be, East Carolina is up there. East Carolina is a normal regional host. ECU is one of the powers in college baseball right now. And it's frustrating to not see the same criteria, being used. I also thought they would probably move up 9, maybe to 8 this week in the rankings. And I didn't expect UCLA to jump that far, Virginia. But, they did. It's frustrating. I don't agree with it. But I also think there's a lot of baseball left to be played. I still think ECU will move up. There's plenty of time. And we've talked about the conferences all the time, but it feels like the margin of error is razor thin for ECU. But then when they're on the right side of that margin of error, it's not being reflected how it should be, I feel like. And that's the most frustrating part to me.
Yeah, it always seems like ECU gets dinged for any slight mishap, and it takes a lot to either overcome that or get the respect, whereas other, teams maybe get a little bit more. But, ECU still gets more respect than the average non-Power 5 school or whatever, but still, there's still kind of a glaring, bias against programs, even with ECU's consistency, which says how hard it is for a school like Campbell to break into the top 25. Glad they finally were able to do that this season. So, yeah, Weston Myers says collegiate baseball still stinks. Couldn't agree more. They have ECU 13 right now. That's honestly higher than I ever thought they would rank ECU. If ECU won the national championship, they would probably rank ECU second because that is collegiate baseball to a T. We got some questions rolling in. Again, if you got comments, questions, anything on YouTube, Facebook, drop them in our comments section. We'll bring it up on the show. Caleb brings up a good one. Scott, Kendall's reply to you this morning was silly. UVA doesn't have any weekend blemishes. I saw you kind of respond to that. So if you want to, the floor is yours to bring it up on this podcast.
Sure. They have one more weekend loss than we do, right? And one of those losses was to a team that we did not lose to. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say they don't have any weekend blemishes when you look at our resume, and we don't either. It's just, if you're going on, so his other reply was that UCLA's schedule was impressive. And if that's the case, then why isn't Vanderbilt ranked number 2? Because there's no way that you would have Wake Forest at 2 if it's based off of, well, you have to have no weekend blemishes and you have to have an impeccable schedule, because Wake Forest has played my high school team and my mom's softball league and a blind school. So, like it's easy to say those things because the moment somebody fact checks you on them, you just don't reply, and then the conversation's over. So, yeah, I mean, that's fine if they want to say that way. I'll always fight for us. When I think we've been slighted in those polls, and I'll always try to comment early so that our comment actually gets seen and responded to. I think the last time I looked, that tweet I had about Virginia and UCLA jumping us had like 40,000 views or something like that. So that's not typical of my Twitter account. So,
Johnny Robertson says UNCW, your stat guy. UNCW has won 9 of their last 10. UNC 11 of their last 13. Campbell 7 of their last 8. William and Mary 4 of their last 5. And now won 6 in a row. So basically, if you play East Carolina and you lose or win, I guess, as in UNCW and Campbell, you have it show off on a winning streak or a good stretch. So that should only help ECU's RPI going forward. I think we're finally starting to get into the territory, maybe another week or so, where we'll really start look at it now. I think ECU's 10 or 11, somewhere in that range, just a good spot to be in, but still very volatile right now in terms of how much it'll move throughout the coming days. Just every game's result changes a lot. Dave Englert adds ECU will likely always be snubbed more than other brand names, but the good thing is we can win it on the field and not be denied, as we have proved in recent years. I mean, I think that's a fair point. Bryant Stock says 1-1 versus quad 1. They're ranked about where they should be. I'm guessing he's referring to ECU.
I'm assuming so. Let's see here.
I mean, I feel like that's probably where, there's not a ton of quad 1 games for a lot of schools right now. So, look, I mean, you can make the argument both ways. It's still very early. I worry about this bias against ECU because, I look at the schedule and there's just not a lot of chances for marquee wins as the season goes on. So is D1 baseball, is the committee just going to keep flip-flopping these teams over past ECU, or can the Pirates rise through the polls of the year? What do you think, Jonathan? I mean, are we making too big a deal about this?
I mean, and just to be, I think, being ranked 10th, I don't think any of us have an issue with that itself. It's just, other teams moving up for reasons that ECU hasn't. I think that's where the argument goes. But yeah, I mean, you're right. We are at that time of the year where your opportunities to pick up wins, marquee wins, are few and far between. And most of them, all of them, come on midweeks. Now, moving forward, you have UCF coming up, and that's it weekend-wise. These Campbell games, these NC State games, all the other ones, the Carolina game makeup, the Old Dominion, those games are the ones that, I don't want to say those are the games that matter, but when you're looking at RPI, those are the games that matter in the case that you need to win. And as we talked about it before, it also just creates the argument that, the margin of error is so razor thin for ECU. And I think that adds so much more pressure, just knowing we got to go out and be perfect. And obviously the team's not looking at it. They don't care. But, it's easy for us to say they pretty much have to go out and dominate the conference, or they're not hosting this year, or they're not going to be a top 8 seed this year. But it's that time of the year where it's starting to matter, and we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating.
Anderson Williams adds, finally TCU fell out of the top 25. I have never seen a 9-6 team ranked 11th in the country, so I feel the rankings are biased. I believe TCU jumped ECU last week, right? So
just a week before last.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, I mean, it's just you just kind of laugh about it. Johnny adds, UNC is on the cusp of being a quad 1 team. Good chance they become a quad 1 team as long as they have a good season. With the ACC schedule, those guys are all going to move up as the season goes along. Dan Rosenblum adds, look at where we were at this point last year, and we didn't have a great remaining schedule. But if you win, you can climb. There's no doubt about that. For sure. Dave adds, are we suggesting we need to schedule up a little, get some games against these brand name top 25 teams? I think you can make that argument. Scott, you asked me in the VIP chat today about, would you like to see ECU play in some more kind of multi-team tournaments? I wouldn't have a problem with that. I wouldn't mind ECU going on the road again and playing. Ideally, on a year ECU plays the majority of the games at home in the series if they're going to continue this 2-for-1. If they end up going back to neutral site, it's not a big deal. But ideally, you play the UNC series and maybe have one other tough weekend in a non-conference game or a non-conference schedule. I would like to see that. But two, with the conference changing, I think you're going to see more conference series, and I think the conference will be better. So I do think it'll even out a bit. But what are y'all thoughts on scheduling up? I think the schedule's at a decent spot right now. But I think you could add maybe another really tough non-conference schedule.
Yeah, I think one thing that you can do is get better teams in for the Keith LeClaire Classic. Maybe at least one other top 25 team. They'll be more likely to do it if they only have to play us once. Maybe make that the Saturday game and have it be a spectacle. I think somebody also suggested a like Carolinas tournament the way they do in Round Rock, or there's a tournament at the Ranger Stadium as well where they get about 8 teams come in. Typically, it's 4 Texas schools, and they don't all play each other, but different teams play each other in the tournament. Maybe we could do that in Durham or Charlotte, or somewhere in South Carolina, and get teams like a South Carolina, a Kentucky, a UNC, NC State, Virginia Tech, and bring them in and have other schools like Coastal or UNC Wilmington also participate in those, and just have a big North Carolina baseball tournament to kind of celebrate the really good baseball that is played both in the ACC and outside the ACC in this state.
All right, we got several questions continuing to roll in. Again, drop them, comments, questions, anything you got. Chuck wants to know, why are we playing George Mason in a 3-game series? Kind of on this note, why not play UVA or Virginia Tech in a 3-game series to build RPI? Again, there is a balance to this. I don't think George Mason historically is a bad baseball program, and even lately they're playing better. I think they've won a handful of games in a row, unless they dropped one recently. This isn't a bad series, and it's not a bad series. Look, you're about to go into conference play. If the damn conference could win some games, then you're about to play Houston. That on paper should be a tough series, and maybe it will be by the time we get here. But Houston's 8-11; they're underperforming. You kind of want an easier final non-conference game to soften up before going into the conference play. So I don't have a big problem with the series. You had the Keith LeClaire Classic, you had the UNC. Maybe earlier in the year you could add another tougher non-conference series, like we said. But Jonathan, any thoughts here? I mean, it's probably also hard to get UVA or Tech to want to play ECU in a 3-game series when they already have a loaded ACC schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it right there. What you just said. It's the other team has to want to come here. And, I hate it, but, the teams like State, those teams, they're not going to want to come here for a weekend series, non-conference, first couple months of the year. And like you said, it's just because they already have such a hard ACC schedule. Obviously, ECU doesn't have that problem with having a tough, and they're on the opposite end of the spectrum there. But, I would like to see, and we've talked about it, I think I've been saying for months now on this podcast just about how I'd like to see, like Scott was just talking about, all those North Carolina schools, Virginia schools, South Carolina schools, whether it's a weekend, whether it's the LeClaire Classic. I think that's a great idea personally, but I'd like to see that more. But I mean, the scheduling itself, non-conference, it's really not all that bad. Like we've talked about, Missouri State's not a bad team. They might not be the sexy names on paper, but when you really look at it, some of those teams like the Missouri States, they're solid. They're good ball clubs, and they're good tests. And I understand ECU at the same time. They're doing what they can. And again, it takes 2 to tango. Those schools have to want to come here, and I think that's really the big problem. It would be awesome, but at this point, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, and the other factor for those two schools specifically is ACC play has started. So and SEC play has also started. So really, those are the two conferences around us. So it's going to be difficult for them to play a 3-game series at this point in the year, specifically. Next year, when we have a bigger conference, I think we'll also be in conference play at this point. So I think you'll see one less of these types of series, one less George Mason or George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or whatever founding father else that we can schedule.
Oh man, nicely done. Weston, thanks for bringing this up. Wake Forest is the most fraudulent team in the top 10. Definitely in the top 5, I can tell you that much. What did Wake do this week? Did they play anybody good? Do y'all know?
Played Duke, didn't they? Or was that last weekend?
I'll tell you in 1 minute. I got it written down.
I think they won 2 out of 3 at Duke last week.
Wake won two out of 3 against Notre Dame. Yeah.
Is Notre Dame any good without Link Jarrett?
They are not.
No. 3 in 1 week. No, not good.
Really interested to see how Wake does against some of these good teams in the ACC. Still not a believer. Wake Forest. You're going to have to prove it to me. You're going to have to schedule ECU in a 3-game series or come to Clark LeClaire in the postseason. Hell, ECU can go to Winston-Salem. I don't care. It'll be all ECU fans anyways.
We'll see how much they fall when they lose a game. We'll be having a conversation with them next week.
Well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to get swept by Miami next weekend. Miami's going to go to number 5, and we're going to stay right where we're at.
That's probably what will happen. McLean wants to know also, is that a Bill Dance T-shirt?
Yes.
It is. So, Scott, fan favorite of the Hoisted Colors podcast.
Bill Dance, also a fan favorite of the Hoisted.
Right. I guess we should actually talk about what happened on the field this past week, guys, in terms of kind of performers instead of – we're going to move off the rankings. This is my fault. Look, this is my fault. I named this the discussion of the podcast. It killed about 30 minutes, so it did the job. Look, we got a job to do. That did the job. But let's talk about some of the stars. We'll continue to kind of mix some questions in as we go along, and we'll answer questions at the end we haven't gotten to yet, so keep dropping them in. But first off, guys, just there's so many individual standouts. It's hard to pick just a couple, but I feel like we have to start with the starting rotation, just dominant numbers. We talked about it all preseason. Is ECU going to be able to establish a starting rotation? Because last year, of course, everybody knows it was CJ Mayhew and basically a bunch of other arms going 2 or 3 innings. This year, it's been the complete opposite almost. You've had tremendous starting pitching, especially for the last 3 weekends. This weekend, probably the best all around. Trey Savage, Josh Gross, each pitching to the 8th. Carter Spivey, career high in strikeouts. Just a dominant weekend on the mound, and right now this looks like one of the best starting rotations in the country. Jonathan, your thoughts on these 3 guys this past weekend?
Yeah, I think something I talked about coming into the season was the importance of finding a rotation and it working and you sticking with it. Because last year, I think so many of the struggles early in the season were just because the pitching staff was really a revolving door. I mean, Carson Whisenhunt, obviously, last minute, gone, and you really scraped the pieces together for the whole season. Guys like Ryder Giles came in, and he was your Friday night guy for a couple of weeks, and he did really well in that role. And eventually it became CJ Mayhew. Garrett Saylor was in the rotation. But what that does when guys are just cycling in and out, it doesn't allow pitchers, mainly bullpen guys, to really settle into roles. And I think that's so important in baseball, especially at this time of the year. And having Savage step up, and he was what, Saturday, I think, to begin the year?
Yep.
So he was Saturday, and then, Carter Spivey, he doesn't pitch second weekend. Savage steps up into that Friday night role, and he is never giving it back. And Savage, just what he's able to do, we're not just talking a good ECU pitcher. We're talking one of the best arms in college baseball. We're talking probably a potential future first-round draft pick, no doubter, if he continues doing what he's doing. And then Carter Spivey, the numbers still, I don't think, reflect what he's done this year, every hit he's given up has been either a weak ball up the middle or a weak ball off the end of the bat that drops in the outfield. Carter Spivey has pitched very well this year since he's come back. And Josh Gross, I think we all had maybe questions coming into the year, but we're finally seeing it piece together. And this weekend against Missouri State, maybe I'm biased because I got there on Friday about an hour and a half early and I watched BP. I watched Missouri State take BP. That team hit tanks. There were balls top of the scoreboard through that crazy wind to left field. I think they live and die a little bit off the long ball. And, guys like Trey Savage, power arm, if he leaves one over the plate, the ball's going to go. Josh Gross, his whole career, that's been his thing. It's been he gives up the long ball a lot. He gives up a lot of loud contact. He didn't do that this weekend. And again, I think Missouri State, you can look at it and you might think, oh, maybe they weren't as good as we thought they were. I really think it has more to do with the pitchers and what they were able to do. And it came at a perfect time because the bullpen is a little shorthanded right now. Willie Lumpkin hasn't been available. Landon Ginn hasn't been available. And again, Garrett Saylor, he was sick early in the year, wasn't really able to settle into the true role he was going to be in. Maybe we're starting to see that. But I think that's the most important thing. It's such an important factor, settling in the roles and sticking with them. Injuries will happen, but having that confidence early in the year, and I know I just went on a very long rant, but I can't speak enough about how important that is. And these guys, that rotation is as good as we'll see, and that's gonna be what carries you through a postseason.
What's crazy is ECU pitching has only allowed 12 home runs this year, and again, I'm knocking on wood as I'm saying all this. My desk is made of wood. The Pirates have hit 21, which is actually a lower number than usual for ECU's offense this time of year. But Josh Groves, you look at his numbers, 3 home runs allowed, but teams are only hitting 133 against him. He's only allowed 12 hits in 26 innings. If he could cut down on the walks, 19 compared to 34 strikeouts, his walk rate is still pretty high. If he cuts down on the walks, man, he is one of the best pitchers in college baseball as well. Pure stuff has taken a jump. So just that dynamic, Scott, of having a guy throwing 94, 95, hammer, slider, great curve, changeup was working really good yesterday on Sundays, has really kind of, I think, completed the transformation of this weekend staff.
Yeah, you look at it, 20 innings and 25 strikeouts this weekend. Just going through the numbers, you have, Trey Savage is 3-0 with a 1.48 ERA and 43 strikeouts with just 6 walks. That's first-round draft pick numbers. And then Groves is 3-0 with a 2.36 ERA, he has 34 strikeouts, but he does have 19 walks. And I think that's prevented him from going a little bit deeper into games. But you saw this weekend, I thought the 3-2 pitch on the last batter he faced was a strike. So it could have been 8 innings out of him on a Sunday. And I don't know if there is a better Sunday starter in the country right now than Josh Groves. He is really putting together the full package from what we look for as a pitcher, and to have the ability to have a guy that can go that deep into ball games on Sunday. You look at these 2 5-game weeks and how many guys have to throw innings, and you come out on Sunday and you only require 1 1/3 out of your bullpen because of how dominant he was. And, maybe if he strikes out the guy to end the 8th, maybe he comes out for the 9th until he gives up a hit. So, yeah, I've been really impressed by Groves. Obviously would love for him to walk a few less people, but I guess if you're not going to give up any hits, it's not much of a difference. And then another guy, Jaden Winter, has really stepped up these last few weeks. Hasn't given up an earned run yet this year. I'll knock on wood too. He's got a .71 whip, so he's given up less than a base runner an inning. He's an Apex guy, so that's cool. Shout out to Pro 5 Academy here in Apex for sending him our way. But yeah, and we've navigated this 10-game span without Willie Lumpkin, without Ginn. What we've done over the last 2 weeks has been, I think, more impressive than maybe what jumps out just based off of the teams we played on paper.
Yeah, and a lot of that goes back to the starting pitching ability to pitch deep into games, making the bullpen not have to cover so much ground, so to speak. And I do want to talk about the bullpen a little bit. We got to talk about the positive first, guys. Wyatt Lunsford-Shinkman has kind of grown into a very capable option. He now leads the team with 10 appearances. As Johnny, I had this myself, and I'm going to give you credit for it. Lunsford-Shinkman, after the UNC series, he got hit hard on that Sunday. I think he faced like 3 batters and gave up just hard contact to all. He's pitched 12 and a third innings with no runs, 2 walks, and 15 strikeouts. Like, he's just punching out guys left and right. He's taking the mound with energy, with intent. You just love to see it. The other guy I feel like we got to mention, how about Jake Hunter, man? Jake Hunter, he's pitched even better than his numbers indicate, and the strikeouts have been up. The pitch mix is there. Jonathan and he really saved ECU on Saturday. In Saturday's game, without him, ECU doesn't have a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. When Jake Hunter is throwing strikes, he is a bona fide weekend rotation arm. And, I mean, I don't say that lightly. We know how good our rotation is. Jake Hunter is in that mix if he, I think, last year and maybe all season was around the zone a little more. And now we're seeing that. I think he still does, kind of struggle with the strike zone sometimes. But I think he settled nicely into that, second midweek guy. Maybe he's first, him and Garrett Saylor. And I mean, Garrett Saylor too. Garrett Saylor's turned it on. But I mean, Jake Hunter, that's a guy, again, he's a starter. So if he can come in, he saved us on Saturday. I think it was Saturday. And without Jake Hunter, I don't know if we win that game. And Jake Hunter came in, pitched very well. And he's just done it. And he's been very good on midweeks too. And again, I think he's a midweek guy. But if you can have that coming into the bullpen, especially if, obviously our starters aren't going to throw 7 innings every game, every weekend moving forward. They're going to have days where they go 4, they go 5. Jake Hunter can come in and throw. He can give you an inning. He can come in for a batter and shut you down, get you out of the jam. Or he can give you 3, give you 4, get you length, get you to the end of a ball game. So that's really valuable, especially with, the state of the bullpen right now. But really nice to see. And, again, he's kind of settling into that role. It's a theme I'm going to keep going back to, but he's settling into his role. I think he has a midweek role, and I think he also has that weekend role out of the bullpen if we need him to.
Yeah, Dan asked, so is Hunter just the weekday guy in a 4-game week until further notice? Dan, you asking like, is he the midweek starter or what? Either way, I think you get a little Sailor in the midweek starter role right now, right, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. Sailor's gone 5+ in his last 2 midweek starts. I think that gives you something that you really need. I think we talked about this in the preseason podcast about how long it's been since ECU had a true midweek starter. That Tuesday night guy that if something happens to one of your weekend guys can jump in and has been starting and has been stretched out and can go, 4, 5, 6 innings in a game. I think that's Sailor right now. I'd actually love to see Sailor and Hunter kind of tango that role where the intent is send Sailor out for, 75, 80 pitches. Then Hunter comes in and, theoretically, maybe you can get a whole game out of those 2 and completely take any stress off the bullpen for the weekend. I don't think we have another 5-game week this year. I may be wrong about that. Someone can fact check that. But if we can go into the weekend with all of our bullpen arms fresh, or we've only had to use 1 or 2 guys for an inning or 2, I think that gives us a huge advantage, especially with the way our starters are pitching, to where we don't need to worry about, this guy pitched 55 pitches on Wednesday, so he's not really there for us on Friday night or, Saturday night or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird how the season's played out in that we kind of thought Garrett Saylor would be a back-end bullpen guy. We kind of thought Trey Savage, really, until the preseason when we really knew he was going to be a starter, we kind of thought he would be a back-end bullpen guy. And, I think the bullpen is still kind of figuring out some roles. And, part of that is due to, Saylor's inconsistency. We've seen Zach Root and Tyler Brott be good at times. Somebody asked earlier, let me see if I can find it real quick. He said, Kevin said, Billy, I don't know if he's trying to be funny here or if he's just off. Billy pulled Root real quick. Is he in good shape or his arm sore? I believe you mean Cliff Godwin. He has been the coach at East Carolina now. This is his 9th season. Billy Godwin coaching at UNCG now. No, Root's fine. Him and Brott are just not being consistent in terms of throwing strikes right now. So when you get behind, no matter how good your stuff is, if you're walking guys, you're going to get hurt. Every pitcher goes through it. It's hard to be dominant for an entire season. And, Jonathan, I do think it is key both those guys get back on track. We've kind of seen Eric Ritchie when he throws strikes. He's really good. I think the question with this bullpen right now is, what's the strike throwing ability? I think the stuff is there. It's just, can these guys consistently throw strikes? Your take on kind of how this bullpen's come together?
Yeah, I think strike throwing is the most important thing when you're a pitcher. We saw what happens when you don't do that. Let's not talk about the Duke game, but you look at the Duke game, and that's what happens when you can't find the strike zone. And you mentioned guys like Tyler Brott and Zach Root, both just really short outings this weekend. And really we talk about this 10-game stretch, 9-1 in the last 2 games, 10 games. It's been without them two. And I think if you take that, knowing you don't have Landon again, you don't have Willie Lumpkin available right now, it's even more impressive. But I think you mentioned Eric Ritchie. He still struggles to find his zone a little bit, but when he is around the zone, he's really good. And I feel like that's the same thing with just about everyone out of that bullpen. It's just who can find his zone consistently and who can do it on a game-to-game basis when they're on. And you look at Willie Lumpkin. I think his issue was more probably getting hit around a little bit. I think he walked a couple guys early in the year, but he bounced back, and now he's your go-to guy. I still think Tyler Brott will bounce back. If Tyler Brott throws strikes, his stuff is dominant. He's a perfect back-end bullpen type guy. Zach Root, not worried about it. He's young. I think he got off to such a good start. We all probably were like, we put him all the way up here, and he's still a freshman. He's still so young, and he's still getting used to college baseball. First really grind through a season like this. And we were all talking about him in the rotation 2 weeks ago. And Zach Root comes back and just throws strikes, and he's around the zone. We've seen what he can do, and he's going to get back to that. I have no doubt about it. And if you can get that from 2 to 3 more guys on a consistent basis, you're going to be in really good shape.
We should see Willie Lumpkin back by this weekend, Cliff Godwin said, and also Landon Ginn. Dave asked, when can we expect to see him, and what should we expect to see from him? So Landon Ginn, per my sources, serving a 22-game suspension. That will end after Friday. And Cliff also said he will be back Saturday, so it matches up. Landon, extremely talented. I watched him pitch in the preseason. He was 91-93 with a fastball, hard slider, also a changeup. He's got back-end bullpen stuff. It's just, how is he going to go from not pitching at all in live games for a long time to being thrust in there? Now, he can develop into a guy. There's no doubt. Also, Willie Lumpkin coming back from injury should be a big boon. Like you said, only 1 walk this season, Jonathan, in 6 appearances. So he was pitching well. He was in the strike zone. So, Scott, I think those 2 guys, and again, I think we can see more Danny Bill, and maybe another one of these guys emerge kind of as the season goes along. So I think the bullpen will improve. It's just still trying to kind of find some roles there.
Yeah, you look at Root. How many games do you play in high school? Like 30. So we're getting like towards what would be towards the end of what he's used to. And then Brott, obviously coming from BNMI, maybe he hasn't played in front of crowds. And I think both of them kind of fell in love with striking guys out earlier in the season. And now they're being a little too swing and miss tendency. You know, they're looking to get swings and misses as opposed to just going up there and using their stuff to dominate people. As far as Ginn, I think we'll see him Sunday and probably the 8th or 9th inning when we're up by 10 on George Mason. I don't think you throw him out immediately into the fire. And I think that George Mason is a team that we should beat by a lot. I say that, and then we probably won't. And I am sorry for doing that to everyone. But, you know, I know they've won 7 in a row, but 6 of the games they've won were against teams that have a combined 1 win. So let's go out there and handle business against them and get some of these guys some more in-game experience, some more time on the mound, and get, you know, Charlie Hodges is another guy that I'd like to see get more work. Danny Bill, obviously. And then honestly, I'd like to see Saylor get some more work on the weekends too, just because we may end up needing him on the weekends come regional time or even super regional time.
Jared Plummer kind of has a question going off that. ECU has a solid amount of talent on our team. If you are the coaching staff, how difficult is it to manage high-level athletes that want to play and can play at other programs right away? Certainly a valid, legitimate question. The good news is this is not foreign to Cliff Godwin. I feel like this has been something he's really dealt with the past 4 or 5 years since he's kind of built this program up. So, you know, I guess you could say the portal, the NIL era has kind of changed some of this stuff. You know, I would like, you know, I'll say I'd like to see more of Cam Burgess. I'd like to see more of Dixon Williams personally. But look, Cliff is around these guys every single day. Jeff Palumbo, Austin Knight, they see these guys every single day. They know what is going to allow the team to perform the best. So I think they've kind of earned the right to for us to trust them at this point. Obviously, there is, you know, you do have to kind of massage certain situations as coaches this day and age. You know, I'm sure there are some tough conversations at times, but also if ECU is having success on the field, Jonathan, I think it becomes a much easier conversation. You know, if you're losing a bunch of games, maybe you try and change things up, but when you're winning, it's kind of hard to disrupt that formula.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at, you know, the guys in the lineup that we might be looking to get out in favor of other guys, those are your veterans. Those are your team leaders. So it's tough to take those guys out too, and that plays into it. It should, and yeah, you said it. The coaches are around the guys every day. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I think on Saturday it was the 7-8-9-1 part of the ECU's order was coming up. I saw Cam Clonch in a dugout with a helmet on, and I'm like, oh, cool, he's coming in. I'm like, I love Cam Clonch. This is his time. And I'm like, okay, pinch hit for Joey Barini. Big spot, pinch hit. Joey Barini comes through with a hit. Pinch hit for Alec Makarevich. AMAC comes through with a hit. Pinch hit for Lane Hoover. Please pinch hit for Lane Hoover. I was begging. Lane Hoover comes up with a big hit. And then what does Luke Nowak do when I called to pinch hit for him? He comes through with another hit. And it was just back to back to back to back. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to continue doing this all the time. And it seems to be working. But, yeah, I mean, we might have guys that want to get on the field, and they might want to get on the field too. But I think if you come here, you are buying into Cliff, and you are buying into the program. And I think if you wait, your time will come. Guys like Jacob Starling, guys like Connor Norby in the past, if you wait, your time will come. And I think there are a lot of talented guys on the bench. Yeah, would I like to see them maybe get some more at-bats right now? Absolutely. But in the end, I trust what they're doing because the record looks good right now, and I have no reason to believe that the record's not going to keep looking good. So we'll see how it plays out. But, yeah, I trust the coaching staff, even though I might at times have disagreements.
Speaking of Starlin, Luke wants to know, is Starlin playing like the best player on the team? I don't know. Josh Moylan tearing the cover off the ball as well. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, Moylan, I think leads the team in on base percentage. Maybe it's still Will Coxon. Will Coxon, I mean, it's hard not to throw his name out there. Playing a position as difficult on your body as catcher, and then still leading the team in batting average. But yeah, we'll go with best hitter for this conversation because I think you could certainly make the argument that Trey Savage is the best player on the team right now. Starling's up there. I think he's 6 of 7 for stolen bases. He's hitting the ball in the gap. He's walking. He's being patient. He had a little bit of a rough stretch there against Liberty, but responded this weekend. If you made me pick right now who I thought was playing the best of anyone on the team, I'd probably pick Starling. But if you gave me 3 choices, I would put Starling, Wilcoxon, and Moylan all in that top 3.
Jacob Starling right now, 18 walks, 3 hit by pitches, 14 strikeouts, 474 on base percentage. Luke Nowak, 16 walks, 2 hit by pitches, 14 Ks, 470 on base percentage. So those 2 guys at the top of your order doing pretty damn good. Another guy we got to talk about, Lane Hoover, getting his mojo back. Dave says, love to hear Cliff express his faith and admiration. Love to see Hoove start to hit again. I just remembered I forgot to say Wyatt. Lunch for future. Damn, I blew it, guys. Only true insiders know. Check out your Twitter feed if you want to really know. From us, that was yesterday, right? Sunday,
I think.
Yep.
Yeah, Sunday's game.
Lunch for street man. All right. Anyways, Lane Hoover, 7 hits. He is 7 for his last, let's see, 3, 6.
13.
13. There you go. Come on. It's killing.
I wrote it down before.
You're like, you and Donnie are competing to be the stat king. 7 for 13. But it's been great to see Hoover get back, hasn't it, Scott?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's a guy that has given us all to this school and this program, and he works hard out there. It's kind of a Ryan Friel comp, if you remember him, and he was one of my favorite players, when I was playing. I'd love to see Hoover get his justice of 7 of 13 in his last 4 games and earn his spot back. And sometimes all it takes is a break.
Skull Pirate has entered the comment section, by the way.
It's a Bill Dance shirt for the 3rd time in the podcast.
Scott is wearing a Bill Dance shirt.
I'm wearing my Bill Dance
autographed
hat next week, and then everybody's going to be confused.
By the way, Skull Pirate says he's triggered by my off-center backdrop. I tried to center it. Look, I need to get it wider. It's in the can. All right, we're working on it. Now you got me all flustered, Skull. I had a comment that I was going to talk about. Now I don't even know. All right, here we go. Here's a good one from McLean. And I think this is a debatable topic, but I think it's a valid one. He says, my only issue with this team, and we've gotten some questions about the offense. He says, my only issue is that I don't think we have a truly feared hitter yet, like a Bryson Worrell, a Packard, Norby, Francisco, Brickhouse, etc. I kind of agree with that, although I will say I think there's potential for sure. Jacob Jenkins Cowart, Wilcoxon, and Moylan. And even, I don't know if Starling will ever be that feared guy, but Jonathan, what's your take on kind of McLean's point with this comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with it as of right now. I think nobody in the current lineup is at that, stature of proven caliber. The Brickhouses, the Packards, the Norbys, they stepped up and they were good over the whole course of the season. We haven't seen these guys. We obviously saw what JJC can do last year. I think he's starting to heat up a little bit too. He's probably close to seeing Josh Moylan right there as well. But, I mean, I do think that the depth to this lineup, and again, we can all say, and I've said it too, but there might be guys you want to see taken out of the lineup every once in a while, but I still think when you look at it 1 through 9, the depth is pretty impressive. I mean, a guy we haven't talked about, and he's not in this same conversation, but he still deserves to be talked about, is Riley Johnson. And he came in when he was inserted into the starting lineup, not only did he provide that guy, he was in the 9-hole to start, and he hit so well to come in. He's got sneaky pop too, but he's going to send it right back up the middle every time. He will get on base, and he's so fast. And Riley Johnson, he brings it defensively too on the base pass, so he's good. So I like the depth of this lineup when it's on, but I do think due to some of the inconsistencies we see with some guys at times, it would be nice to have that, Bryant Packard, Thomas Francisco, Spencer Brickhouse type guy that's a consistent threat at the top. Again, JJC can be that guy. I think we're still kind of waiting for him to reach that level this season. Not there yet, but yeah, I think he'll get there. To me, he's the closest you have, him and Josh Moylan.
Johnny Robertson adds, Carter Cunningham's attitude is great when he doesn't start. He always stays positive and is ready to contribute. That bomb into the win on Sunday was impressive. Yeah, he's been almost better off the bench at times than he has in the starting lineup. But it's awesome to see him, putting together a solid season. Austin Kearns type guy, says Dan Hunt.
I agree, 100%.
I mean, maybe Adam Dunn.
We need a 200 hitter with 45 home runs. Oh, no, we have that. We have AMAC.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. I shouldn't have said that.
Listen, man, if you're gonna strike out, I will say this about AMAC. When he tees it up, he's almost like the Missouri State guys this past weekend. Like, he's swinging so hard when he makes contact, it's going to go a long way. There's nothing wrong with having a guy like that in your lineup. You just can't have every guy like that be in your lineup, if that makes sense. All right, let's talk about this coming week. Again, if you got any more questions, I may have missed one or two. Skull Pirate, he did ask, is it weird that a former ECU football player umpires ECU baseball games? Is it weird that a former ECU football player ejected an ECU head coach in the baseball game he was umpiring? Maybe. But Wilson Rayner's been umpiring for a long time, so I don't think it's that weird. If it was like Damon Magazoo out there out of nowhere, like, that would be a little weird. Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's talk about this coming week, guys. Again, if you got questions, comments, drop them. We'll get them to you. Skull, I'm not answering all your questions. Sorry. Campbell on Wednesday in Fayetteville. First off, are either of you guys planning to go? I am not. What about you guys?
I will not be.
I will not be there. We'll be listening on the radio, it sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds like no stream. Again, maybe that'll be corrected by the time you guys hear this podcast, but neither Campbell or ECU, the schedules are showing a stream right now. It will be played at the Fayetteville Woodpecker Stadium. We will have intern Kaysen there. I am being put on a travel restriction. My wife is 10 days from her due date, so can't really leave the city limits in case craziness strikes. So yeah, I'll be listening on the radio as well, it sounds like. But huge game. Somebody asked earlier, is this a must-win? I'm not going to scroll all the way back to the top, but they were like, is this a must-win game? I'm going to say it's not a must-win game. I do think it is a big game. Campbell with an RPI of 14. They're a potential hosting team. You look at their schedule, they have an even easier schedule than East Carolina. Really looking forward to this one, Scott. I think it should be a great game.
Yeah, 100%. It's two top 25 teams, two teams fighting for respect. If we don't win this one, then we can't take the series, right? So we get one more game against them later in the year at home. Yeah, I mean, it's a game that I think Campbell has only beaten us, one time in the last however many seasons. So, or maybe two times now. But it's a game I wish I could watch. I think it will be a well-played game. I wish I could go. Obviously, when you have two kids and one is small, as you'll soon find out, kind of already finding out, it's hard to travel, especially during the week. But yeah, it's a game that I really wish we could get video for. And I've harped on this a lot about playing at places where there can't be video. I think it's unfair to the fans of the program. Which I will say, I think this is a really cool venue for the team, and I do commend the staff for scheduling games like this where they get to play in minor league stadiums and nicer venues. But it is tough to not be able to watch, and we're spoiled because I remember Actually, my wife showed me a picture yesterday from us of 10 years ago, sitting on our porch with game trackers up, and we're just listening to the radio of an ECU game with the game tracker up on the porch, and that was the norm. Not ESPN Plus like we have now. So we're really lucky to get to see 95% of our games, and I wish I could see this one. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a must win, but it's a really want to win for sure.
Wags, before I get your take on this game, I just want to read over the coming RPIs for the midweek games, and then I'm going to read the RPIs for the weekend series. Campbell is 14, UNCW 152, NC State 15, Old Dominion 22, Charlotte 102, NC State again 15, North Carolina 56, Old Dominion again 22, Campbell again 14. So pretty much all top 50 or top 100 teams. Weekend series, George Mason 248, Houston 204, UCF 81. Give him a little golf clap. Cincinnati 154, Wichita State 140, Tulane 183, Cincinnati again 154, Memphis 181, USF 173. So again, I'm not going to say ECU should throw Trey Savage on Wednesday. You got to play to win the weekend, but at what point do you start prioritizing these midweek games, if at all, compared to conference play? I mean, you got to win the conference championship, there's no doubt, but how do you balance that, starting with really what I think is a big game on Wednesday against Campbell?
Yeah, 100%. I think, again, I don't think Campbell is a must win, but yeah, you want to win it. You want to win all these midweeks because, again, that's your only chance to resume boost. Yeah, UCF, but man, UCF series are always close and tight too. So, and that's when UCF isn't even good. So, these midweek games are so important. And I don't think you mess with the rotation and you go and throw you Savage, Spivey, or Sailor, or sorry, not Sailor, Gross on Wednesday. But I do think it comes at a good time given what the starting rotation did this past weekend. Because then even guys like Wyatt Lunchford-Shankman, who pitched twice, I think he threw around 30-something pitches, he's probably available Wednesday. I would say everyone's available Wednesday. You probably start Sailor, but after that, it's really probably hands on deck, all hands on deck. And I think that's how you have to approach it. Going against the weaker teams in conference play, I think you're going to be okay if the starting rotation continues to do what it does. Because, like I said, then your bullpen's more fresh and you can use them on midweeks. And, if you need Tyler Brott to go out there and give you a couple innings on Wednesday, cool, he can do it. If you need Wyatt Lunchford-Shankman to do it, he can do it. Zach Root, cool. Anybody else, they're all available. It's just a matter of keeping that ability for those guys to do that every week moving forward. So I think it adds a little more pressure to weekends too for that reason. And it's these midweek, you got to come out hit. If you don't come out and hit early, if you're trailing, if you do it against William and Mary, you come back, whatever. And no disrespect to William and Mary, but these Campbells, NC States, Old Dominion, they're different. If you come out and you do not hit early in the game against these teams, you will not win. And we've seen it happen, and we're going to see it continue to happen. So it just adds a lot of pressure. But again, I think if the weekend rotation keeps doing what it does, you have the ability to continue throwing out anyone and everyone on these midweeks, and that's what you have to hope for.
Somebody asked earlier, who will Campbell throw? They're not going to throw the right guy because he pitched this past Friday, but they'll probably continue to throw their midweek guy, who's I think it's East Tennessee State transfer. He threw against ECU the first time, pitched really well. You'll probably see him again. You'll probably see Cummings out of the bullpen. He pitches against ECU in every potential game. So you're going to see their best arms outside of probably the Friday guy. ECU's got to counter with a better approach or a better execution this time offensively. Scott, I do think the beginning of this game will be important. They can't, some slow starts in the midweeks, especially at what point, do they turn that around? Is it this week? I guess we'll find out, but that's certainly a key.
For sure. It's a team that we got to jump out on. It's a team that can also come back on us. But if you look at the last game, they gifted us 3 runs on a misplayed ball, and we really struggled. But I think our offense is very different now than it was then. We're still kind of figuring out roles and lineups and all those kind of things. I think you'll see a different ECU offensively. And I think this is great. I think this is our first revenge game of the year. First time we played a team that we lost to. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond. Our team responds to having to play a team that they've lost to, because we haven't been in that position very much.
All right, let's make our picks, guys, for the coming week before we get out of here. If you got any final questions, drop them below. Actually, before we do that, who is the home team in Fayetteville? McLean just asked. They will actually flip a coin for it, I'm told. So
they should do the rock, paper, scissors thing that Frank said. I like that way better.
I mean, honestly, I'd rather see that than flip a coin for home or away. Last week, I believe you guys were both right with 4-1 predictions. I predicted 5-0, and they immediately lost. So I don't really know what to do. This time I'll go last. We'll go with Jonathan first. I feel like we made you go last week. You redeemed yourself. You nailed the prediction. So what do you got for the ECU 4-game week?
I'm going to go with 3-1. I have ECU losing to Campbell. And it's for the reasons I just talked about. I think that's fair. That's fair. Boo me all you want, but I hope I'm wrong. But I think for the reasons I just talked about, offensively, I still do have questions. I still do think the team waits a little too long to get going sometimes, and we see it weekends, we see it midweeks, and I'm not seeing consistent enough at bats from 1 through 9, and really nobody's excluded, just about. Sometimes, I think I want to see the lineup tinkered with a little bit, but for me, I don't know if the offense is going to come out and do what it needs to do against Campbell's pitching, and we saw what happens against Campbell if ECU does not hit well. So I think ECU is going to lose to Campbell, come out, and I think you win pretty convincingly in all 3 games over the weekend. I'll say 7. You're going to average at least 7 runs margin of victory this weekend, I think. So that's what I got.
Scott, you're next. What do you got?
Well, I predicted this year we would go 45-11, and I still believe that. Maybe I'm as hard-headed as a Pachycephalosaurus, but I'm going to go with 4-0 this week, and I think we win all 4 games convincingly.
Wow. So Jonathan's providing the motivation. Scott is providing the hype. I'll
You
tell
just
you
going to
what.
piss everyone off, Aga?
I'm trying to think how to play it. I'm going to go. I just feel like ECU is really good in revenge games in baseball, especially. I feel like they got to take this one personally, man. Losing the way they did in Bowie's Creek. I just feel a great performance coming on Wednesday night. I don't know why. I just feel ECU is going to win like 7-1. Maybe I'm way off, but I feel good about it. I think the Pirates could win. And then I think they're going to lose the game to George Mason over the weekend. Get a little too high on themselves. Come back. 3-1 is what I'm going with, along with Jonathan. Certainly hoping for a 4-0 week. It's just hard to continue to dominate and sweep every weekend. But hey, if you get the starting pitch and ECU has, you're gonna continue to have success. Luke Dover says, "Will Cliff get ejected? In what game, Luke?" I'm guessing the Camel game. I'm gonna say since he just got ejected, he will not get ejected this week. Later in the season, give him some time. He'll find his way. Next time Wilson Rayner's behind the plate, maybe he'll ask for an ejection again. I'm still saying that he probably tried to get ejected. I don't think there was it's not a situation where Wilson ejected him because he was being mean. I'm sure Cliff asked for it. So we're getting a lot of eject Jonathan from the podcast comments.
Hey, look,
Frank
Igo
says-
just said 3-1 too.
Yeah. Frank says, come on, we are Pirates. Skull says, I wonder if Cliff has a certain amount of ejections he can have a year before the AD gets mad. I don't think so. I think he has unlimited. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Otherwise, we're all night. Final thoughts. Scott, you said 45-11. You're really still – I tell you what, is there a chance ECU finishes even better than that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that this league is there's enough bad teams in this league where we can go 3-0 on most weekends. I think to go 45-11, we'd have to go 20-4 in conference, which is what we've done. I think the last 2 years, or we won 20 games 3 years in a row. 1 year was the year of the 4-game series, so we went 20-8 that year. I think we went 20-4 in 19 and 20-4 last year. I think we beat that mark this year. I think we win 21 or more conference games and end up, 45-11 or 44-12. I'll stick with 45-11. I think we're on pace right now. I think 80% of 56 is like 44.5 or something like that. So we're right on track, and we played more difficult teams to this point than we will over the next 30 some games.
You heard it there. Scott says the Pirates will win 47 games.
50.
Wow, my lights just flickered on and off. That was really freaky. As I said that, so all right, good question here before we get out of here, and I promise we'll wrap it up after that. I'm sorry. Skull wants to know who will host the podcast when I goes out on paternity leave. Who's going to be the host, Scott or Jonathan? Is what I want to know.
I think we'll rock paper scissors for it.
Y'all should do a live coin flip on the air.
Yeah, we'll do it when we start off.
The Black Pearl, who also just drops nuggets all day on the baseball threads. We'll just get him. He'll sail in.
Let's just get Cliff Godwin to come on and host it for us.
I would love to see his reaction to some of these questions.
Some of our answers, too.
Yeah. You can see it live on the Hoist the Colors YouTube page some games when he does his post-game press conferences. He doesn't shy away from getting on us reporters. But, hey, he's been good this year. Cliff, if you're listening, we appreciate you.
We love you, Cliff.
All right, let's get out of here, guys. For Jonathan, for Scott, I'm Stephen Igo. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast. Appreciate you guys for commenting, as always. Again, like, comment, subscribe, and then after you do each of those things, hit the notifications bell so every Monday night when we go live, you know that we're going live. And who knows, next Monday it might be Jonathan that is hosting. Maybe it's Scott. Maybe it's the Black Pearl, led by Johnny Depp himself, hosting this podcast. All right, we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for listening to the Hoist the Colors podcast.